Tesla semi-production is ready to start in April of 2020. We explore a number of issues affecting the truck and its arrival. And as usual, we have our health tips afterwards. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Also want to thank our Patreon supporters as well as our subscribers. If you enjoy the show, please take time to like and subscribe. Today, our B-roll is video of the building of Gigafactory 1 in Reno, Nevada area. And hope you enjoy and look forward to your comments. So something happened recently, which is that we actually were preparing for our story on the Model Y, and we decided to go ahead and take a look at what was going on with the Semi as well, because it turns out that the ordering process for the chips that go into the Semi were being ordered at the same time as the chips that go into the Model Y, separate from the other chips that Tesla was getting. So one of the surprise things that we encountered was that there's an analyst from Deutsche Bank who actually contacted a company that we believe is TSMC, that's a large fab that's based in Taiwan. So once I saw this story about this fab and its production, I was kind of surprised, because Tesla has a habit of anybody that says things, be it employees or customers, will actually get into a very sticky situation where Tesla can say, we won't do business with you anymore. And so I was kind of surprised, stunned to hear that there was a company that does business with Tesla that wasn't extremely secretive and fearful of Tesla's retribution. And so what I then got from there's a buddy of mine, his name is Lyman. He's a PhD, went to Stanford together, but he went to MIT, and I guess his PhD from Georgia Tech, but I still consider him a MITFID, which is a PhD from MIT. And so we just finished a sort of an hour-long sort of training session on how fabs operate, and therefore how Tesla has to deal with the fab as it's trying to deliver product. So we wanted to review this with you, and the reason is that there are different aspects of Tesla that are worth understanding, and one of them is the fact that Tesla is doing a lot of AI chips. So all the cameras, as you know, the vehicle, particularly the Model S, has 8 cameras, and so all the data that's being processed by those cameras in order to do everything that the vehicles does has to have certain chips that drive that process. In this case, Tesla is actually building its own chips. And it turns out that currently there are only 2 places in the world that are able to manufacture the chips that Tesla needs. So one of the things so there's a bunch of data points here, and I realize this is getting a little bit technical beyond what I know is my expertise, but I was able to understand it and therefore can share it with you. But I hope you guys will choose to walk along with where we're headed when it comes to the Semi. So basically what he explained was that there's this place called TSMC. They're based in Taiwan, where Tesla's getting their AI chips. It turns out that when you get down to 5 to 7 nano, that size only has 2 manufacturers that have fab space available. Intel is a third that does it, but they're having issues, so they're really not available. So you're pretty much stuck with Samsung or TSMC as a source for that. These fabs cost about $15 billion, so it doesn't make sense for companies typically to do this themselves. And the way things work is the fabs will actually sell space in their manufacturing facility to different companies. So one of the things that popped up was that there's a question mark, which is, I was actually surprised to learn that the chipset that goes into the Semi was different than the chips that they were building out for the regular cars, starting obviously with the 3 all the way up to the X and S. And I kind of posed a question, why was that? And the answer is the Semi is actually running more cameras. And so you actually have it in compute. You have to have high computational power across more. And then there are other things installed in the truck, which include things like the goal of the truck is to find ways to provide driver-assisted driving in ways that the driver could be on the road longer, but that road length is sort of reduced if the truck takes on a lot of the burden of driving. So there's AI activities in the trucks that are different than, like convoys, et cetera, that are different than what's being done in the car. So you actually have kind of a different fab situation. So there are these interesting sort of data points that pop up that explain why we're choosing April as our delivery. What they explain is typically people have to get in line as much as 4 to 6 months in advance. Once you get in line, there are a whole bunch of rules that go with it. If you decide to slow down or not take your order, if they can't resell that space, you've got to pay all kinds of fees. In theory, I guess you could increase your order size, but the problem that Tesla has is they compete with companies like Apple that orders 50 million at a time. And so Apple can actually take over for a fab for a month and a half. So basically, for the call it 5 to 600,000 vehicles that Tesla is doing, it's a relatively small player when they're approaching these giant fabs to have work done. So Tesla has to be very carefully organized and managed in order to ensure that they can actually get the chips they need to actually build anything. So it's an interesting circumstance because, there's a bunch of fab rules. You got to get in line. There's some very big players out there. It also, part of the reason we chose April as the delivery time for the truck is that typically people don't store chips for more than 6 months. So when the analysts went out and did this survey, this is end of October, beginning of November of 2019. So as you can see, it lines up to 6 months later when those chips would start to be delivered at scale for both the trucks and Model Y. So what's interesting about this is that, so there's just a bunch of items that he kind of threw at me regarding if you screw up and don't take your chips, there are penalty fees. Bigger suppliers like Apple can get away with screw-ups, but smaller companies like Tesla with only 600,000, they can't get away with anything. And it's also another note that there are only 2 fabs that are capable at the 5 to 7 nano. It turns out that at 14, there are 4 companies that you could deal with. And if you go into older technology, that's at a higher number. Those chips are less expensive, and there are more places that produce because they're producing out of older facilities. But the problem you run into is that you don't get sort of the latest, best relative to the AI solutions that Tesla's engaged in. So we wanted to sort of review some of these because basically what's happening is that even though Tesla seems kind of big for us in terms of what they're ordering, they actually need to be very, very carefully organized because they're competing with AMD, Apple, and other large entities that suck down huge quantities of chips, and they're a relatively small player. So in essence, TSMC can get it with, I want to call it murder in this case, because they can discuss Apple as a client or Tesla as a client and get away with it. And the reason is that Tesla is a relatively small company when you look at their order book. And so if they say something and get in trouble, you've got a choice. You can go to Samsung or you can go back to them. And basically everybody has the same problem, which is stacks of orders that are lurking there. Now, there are all these side questions that come up. For example, it turns out that Apple, one thing you can do in theory is say, oops, my manufacturing isn't going as planned. I'm going to shut down my demand currently. So Apple, because they're so big, has been known to try to do just in time, where they buy their way forward in the line if they want to do something, Or if the number of iPhones aren't selling well enough, they can say, hey, we're out. And they have to pay a certain amount of money sort of on the bottom end. So with Tesla's pre-order process, we don't see any big problem with them having stuff they could order, or knowing what their order should be and getting in line on the schedule that makes sense. The sort of key question we were asking about is, well, let's see now, if you stack up a bunch of chips that would go into the trucks, is it possible that people might have chips sitting there for 6 months to a year before they install the truck, which means it would push back the delivery time for the trucks? And what he explained was that if you're going to go that long, obviously it makes sense that you actually order them later, because you're going to your build is going to be in that time frame, versus ordering them earlier and have all that inventory sitting there you have to pay for, but you're not using. So hence, we're looking at 6 months post the October-November timeframe, with a delivery in that April to May timeframe of when they're getting the chips that would represent a key component of what's being produced. So what we're sort of angling for here also is the fact that we didn't get any idea what the scale was, but it's our estimate that someplace in the 1,000 to 3,000 trucks a month is the number that'll have to be produced in order to keep the production line actually reasonably staffed with trained people and ready to go. The number, if you're doing 3,000 a month times 12, is about 30,000 vehicles, 3,000 a month times 10, is 30,000. So we're like 34,000 vehicles a year is sort of the break-even number that we see out there. But obviously, if you order more, so let's say 100,000 might be a unit run. If you order 100,000 units worth of chips, it's more efficient to order in larger quantities. So our thought process here is that it's likely that the demand number and the real reserve numbers for Tesla are higher than the obvious public numbers we've seen, and therefore they'll have incentive to do more. But there's an adjustment process. If you only are producing 1,000 to 3,000 vehicles a month, the size of the facility is very different than if you're producing 10 to 20,000 a month. And if you choose a spot, you have to figure out a way to increase that count. So, there's a lot of sort of competing issues that are going on. But I guess, as you can see, what we're doing is extrapolating a lot of information from the chip order for the trucks, from how things normally work in a manufacturing environment. And therefore, we're making the conclusions that we're making currently. So you don't have to send me any flaming emails that you hate my analysis, because you know the roots of the analysis and you can make your own conclusions from what we've said. So thank you for those who send me flaming emails all the time, or flaming messages at the bottom of the show. So what we wanted to further dive into is the fact that the question popped up, well, where are they going to build it? It's not in Reno, and they definitely can't build it at the main facility. So our location target is Livermore, California. The one other thing that we're trying to figure out that's kind of interesting is part of the not release the vehicle thing for Tesla has been to avoid competitors seeing some of the innovations that have been done on the truck. And it's going to be interesting how this rollout works, because they almost need to put security guards on the storage facilities, because they have some large customers that are taking the delivery, and they don't. And in many of those cases, those customers have vehicles sitting right next to large competitors like Daimler and other sort of trucking entities. So it'll be interesting to see if Tesla's able to sort of preserve the secrets for a long enough period of time to get large numbers of vehicles out there. And I feel like the answer to it is yes, only because the real difference is the software solutions for thermal management as well as energy management that drives Tesla's success currently. So we kind of look forward to the truck arriving. You do have a great question coming, and the question is, why isn't Tesla trying to run a larger number of vehicles earlier in the process? And the answer is that the Model Y ramp is actually a serious drain on cash and manpower all resources, especially cash. So while they can afford to run small runs of vehicle on the front end, they can't necessarily run at the same size that they would run if they weren't trying to ramp the Y currently. So dual vehicle ramping, same time, bad deal. So hence also with the Y coming at the end of January, it gives you a breather to get started on the truck in that April-May time frame. We think April, but obviously it could actually be earlier depending on if they have all the parts and so forth and they're ready to go in terms of putting it together. So I was kind of excited to get a little bit of information about the Semi that wasn't necessarily dependent directly on Tesla because, as you know, things like how many vehicles have been ordered, how many you're producing, almost nothing has been given up on the Semi versus when you look at things like the Cybertruck. You know, Elon really wanted to pub the fact that they were doing well with the initial 250,000 units ordered that he discussed along with the low reserve price. And so it's kind of nice to sort of get a window on the company from another angle that represents sort of concrete data points that you can leverage to better understand what's going on. So to review, orders for both chips, for both the Semi as well as the Y were given scale orders back in the October-November timeframe, and now are scheduled for delivery starting now at the end of January, heading into subsequent months. You know, 1,000 vehicles seems like a lot, but for me, it feels like a test quantity. So when the other comment came up that they were getting scale orders for truck chip parts, if you will, this suggested to us that's a 3,000 to 5,000, maybe 10,000 a month production run that Tesla's preparing for on those trucks. And they wouldn't necessarily discuss scale if they weren't planning to get up into that. So we're looking at break even and minimum in the numbers we were talking about to really make it a profitable set rather than just a break even. You're definitely in a 3,000 to 5,000 trucks a month situation. And if Tesla's producing at that number, and now I want to say compelled to do so because they've ordered the parts, you know, that's another thing. They're not going to order the parts if they're not planning to build. So yeah, I guess that's another sort of variable in the ointment to be considered. So we were really looking forward to diving into this a little bit because it's rare to get a look at supply chain for Tesla and what's going on. And also it's kind of fun to see an entity that's pushing out 50 million phones worth of chips for places like Apple. And so if, in the case of TSMC, if Elon Musk got mad, he would have a choice, and the choice would be he could leave and then decide when he's coming back because he doesn't have any other options if he wants to get at a certain number of chip. We're at about 18 minutes here. I deliberately have not been answering questions. I would be happy to field questions as you guys might throw them at me. I think that I was kind of excited about today because it's fun to get to talk to smart people, to do research, and also have that input that we can share that's unique and that shows a little bit more intensity than what color vehicle is being produced. And so hence all of our conversation today. We're going to, you think it's worth for Tesla getting into mining business or chip manufacturing to secure supply chain? They are already involved in mining. I know that there's some mining going on by Tesla in Nevada when it comes to lithium ion. Obviously, cobalt is not available there. That's why they're buying that. In terms of chip vertical integration, to be on the leading edge, as was pointed out by our advisor, is between 10 and $15 billion. So I don't think that it's a good idea to, if Apple is using other people's fabs and their order sizes are, call it 1/200 times the size of amount, I don't think it's a wise move for Tesla to sort of get into the mix of that at all. So no, I don't think they'll get into the chip zone. So yeah, securing the supply chain is a good thing. I believe that Tesla actually has real numbers to work with as they're ordering chips. So they don't really have to worry about supply chain issues because, they've got a nice process going. The discussion has been that the battery limitation has been the holdup on the Model 3s. And so it just seems to me that their chip side ordering isn't a problem. And it's in the case of the batteries, you have a year-long process to ramp. Whereas in this case, if you want to ramp on chips, it seems like it's getting a slot 3 to 4. It's only 3 to 4 months away from you getting another slot that allows you to push out more chips. So that's my look at that. Any rate, so our conclusion is that we're looking forward to April, May max sightings of a lot of semis showing. No doubt that by summer, June, July, we'll have sort of scale quantities to be able to take a look at. So, some things to think about. Any rate, there's a comment here about Fiat paying for, the $10 billion, building of your own fab. The problem is exactly, Okin just made a point that the reason why people don't mess with fabs at those price points is that they have a relatively short period of time that they're able to make money. And so putting that much capital at risk, unless you're, almost government size, is unwise because it's not that long of time before that thing is obsolete and then you have to move on. So it's a very tough business. It says, is Fiat Chrysler doesn't pay for it just to buy Berlin. Several people have gone through, and we have to make a show about this, and that is that Berlin is just like China. It's very, very cheap, meaning the EU is paying for that factory, and therefore it's a lease option Tesla has on that thing. So their out-of-pocket is actually fairly low, as in none out of pocket. And they talk about a $45 million to actually buy the land that they're building a plant on. But it's going to be a $2-3 billion factory, and the EU wants Tesla in Europe, and therefore they're the ones that are digging to put it in, and Tesla will pay fees, but it's not a Tesla cost situation. At any rate, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We look forward to the semi arriving. And now that the chips have been ordered, and then we can anticipate that the rest of the supplies are being collected, we're really looking forward to it rolling out and being, out in the world and making a difference to reduce pollution and deliver a lot of goods. We very much look forward to your comments after show. Please remember to like and subscribe. We could use some help on Patreon or on PayPal. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. In German, Tschüss, au revoir, French, Lehitrot, Hebrew, Choda Hafez, Farsi, Hejdo, Swedish, Ni hao ma, Chinese, Zdravstvuyte, Russian, hello. In Jamaica, we say, even a dog likes some meat, pan and bone. Before I say enough respect, one of our guests asked we share some more Jamaican phrases. So that's one that's kind of fun because most Jamaicans prefer heavier women, and hence the comment that I just shared. At any rate, thanks once again for joining us. We look forward to your comments. Have a great day. Don't forget 25 leg lifts per leg. Fried foods only once a week. Don't go to bed within 2 hours of eating, preferably 4 hours to let the food digest. Have a great day. Bye for now. And thanks once again for joining us.